NPR, the paragon of intellectual honesty. What's the story about, Sitch?
So we've all, NPR has become a joke over the last, some years. It's just being so hyper left-wing, so hyper progressive. And this insanely interesting, very detailed article came out where a guy named Yuri Berliner, who worked at NPR for 25 years, Adam. Okay, this is not some new guy. He still works there, by the way. He's the current senior business editor. And he's been working at NPR for 25 years. He says he's not some conservative. He voted against Donald Trump both times. And as he pointed out in the article, both his parents are lesbian.
Okay. Well, look, that's a great hire for NPR. For
Exactly. So, but this guy, Yuri, he wrote this very long article, very detailed article, super fascinating article about how and why NPR has become ideologically captured by this like far left progressive bubble.
Right. Yes.
And so I just want to go over some parts of this article here.
Okay, let's do it.
Right.
Look, was it a mystery to you? Did you not know? I mean,
we all knew that it was, right, but I didn't know why exactly, right?
Sure, the details, they eluded us, but I did suspect it had something to do with political partisanship.
Well, sure.
Yeah.
And it's always interesting because, from the outside, you look at NPR, we look at MSNBC, CNN is trying to be a little better now, but, you look at them, or, Fox News, and you say, like, do the people inside know that it's all like a scam? Do they know it's all a grift? They know the BS? Or are they all true believers? Or are they true believers and know that they're ideologically biased, or do they think they're just speaking what is true? And that's what's always fascinating to me. And this is very clear that someone in NPR is coming out and they're like raising the red flag, saying we used to be honest, middle of the road journalism, and now we're just become partisan hacks.
Right.
It's very apparent.
All right.
And so, what this guy points out something interesting, which I didn't know. He said, if you look at the data in 2011, for the viewership of NPR, he says in 2011, 37% of the listeners of NPR described themselves as liberal, 23% as enlightened centrist, and
really?
There you go, 26% as conservative. So it's actually like a pretty good mix of people, right? In 2011. Right. But now only 11% of listeners view themselves as somewhat conservative. Okay. 21% as being centrist, and a whopping 67% as being left or progressive.
Right. Okay.
Right. So the numbers have changed dramatically in terms of like what their audience is looked at. Now you might say, okay, Adam, where do you think the decline began? Exactly. Where did NPR's decline begin?
When they decided to suck up to the Democratic Party?
No, but like, what do you think it was that set off, the people there? Like, what was the one thing that you think started this?
The one thing. Let me
the first thing.
It was 2016 when Trump got elected.
It was Donald. You're correct. It was Donald Trump. That's right.
Right. Trump he's like a bull in a china shop for these people.
Yes. It's very emotional. So Yuri here, who, by the way, doesn't like Trump, he talks about how when Trump was elected, and even before, NPR and its staff became infatuated with the Trump-Russia collusion story. And he talks about how the writers at NPR, the journalists at NPR, were so into this that they would just believe basically anything, specifically anything that Adam Schiff would say.
Oh, at all. Adam Schiff guy.
And quote, Yuri says, the Schiff talking points became the drumbeat of NPR's news reports. Okay, so never good when your journalist organization just starts regurgitating what a politician is saying, right?
Full cloth,
without doing their due diligence or being critical here. But as Yuri points out, what happened when the Mueller report came out and there was no collusion between Trump and Russia found? What do you think happened? Do you think that NPR acknowledged their shortcomings? Do you think they realized their mistake, reflected on what they did wrong?
Probably not.
No, no, they didn't do anything. And as Yuri himself says, quote, what is worse is to pretend it never happened, to move on with no mea culpa, no self-respect, no self-reflection, especially when you expect high standards of transparency from public figures and institutions, but don't practice those standards yourself. That's what shatters trust and engenders cynicism about the media. Okay,
100% true.
perfect.
Yeah, they
And
need
then
to
he
do
talked.
some kind of mea culpa. They need to basically say, look, we got this one wrong. But they couldn't do that because they hated Trump so much.
Yes. And I mean, listen, he doesn't say this, but I would also speculate, and this is my own speculation from when I talk to people on the left. They don't care what the Mueller report says. They don't believe it. They think that there still is some Trump Russia collusion
Exactly.
connection or something.
They
So,
just can't help it.
right. He also said then after that, the next big thing to him that stood out was the infamous Hunter Biden laptop story.
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
that was a big mess up.
And how NPR, like a lot of organizations, didn't really cover it. And he says, quote, Yuri says, quote, here's how NPR's managing editor for news at the time explained the thinking. We don't want to waste our time on stories that are not really stories, and we don't want to waste the listeners and readers' time on stories that are just pure distractions. Okay. And so obviously it turns out that the Hunter Biden laptop story was real and it wasn't just a distraction. And yet, based purely on really nothing, based on you had some ex intelligence people who weren't working for the government anymore said that they thought it seemed fake, and that was really it. And some random other, people just saying that they thought it seemed fake, and NPR just said, "Oh, I guess it's fake then," right?
Framing it as a distraction is very telling.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nothing to see here, just a distraction. Yeah.
Well, and I'm curious. I can almost guarantee if we go back that NPR talked about the Trump P-tape accusations.
Oh, yeah. That distraction was great.
Right.
That
Yeah.
was a
Which
great
turned out obviously
distraction.
not be true. Yuri also claimed that during a meeting with someone who he described them as one of NPR's best and most fair-minded journalists. He said that they told him they were glad they weren't covering the Hunter Biden laptop story because it could help Trump win the election.
That's so bad.
Okay.
That's so bad.
Isn't it?
Yeah, that's how you lose all your credibility.
The, I think, when I was younger, I thought it was kind of silly when I'd hear journalists say they don't vote. And now it makes perfect sense to me. I
Yeah.
think you I think if you're a journalist, you can't be an actual honest to goodness, unbiased, impartial journalist unless you don't vote.
Yeah.
I don't think it's possible because you're gonna be too emotionally attached one way or the other. And actually, it's very interesting. I forget his name. There was an older person who used to work at NPR who doesn't work there anymore, who was talking about how there was a lot of conflict because a lot of the young journalists, like the older journalists, would understand that they shouldn't necessarily go on social media and broadcast all their opinions about the world and everything, and they should try to like remain neutral and impartial. And the younger journalists just won't have it. They all want to be these like freedom fighters on the internet.
Right. Yeah, it's a different mindset, a different cultural mindset. It really is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You really can't even participate in partisan politics in any way. I mean, this is why I try to be kind of aloof about this stuff because yeah, I prefer to be impartial and really to care more about the truth than actually who is going to win this fight. But I know a lot of people, it frustrates them because they see this battle as like an existential threat for society,
Right,
right?
right, right.
So
Yeah.
so they don't like it. They don't like you being, nonchalant about it. They don't like you not really caring. The
I
stakes are
mean,
too high.
maybe that's just part of our cynicism. I'm not one of the people that says like the Democrats and Republicans are the same. That's not true. They are different. And if you vote for Democrats or Republicans, they're going to enact different policies that are going to have different effects on the future of this
Right.
country and
But
on the
are they
world.
going to
Right.
destroy everything?
But that's where I'm like, I don't think that's going to destroy, like, yeah, I don't think one party is going to end up destroying the world in any, way that I would, feel super motivated to. But okay. So he also talks about how that NPR again, uncritically just dismissed the lab leak.
Oh yeah, that
concept
was enough.
here.
So
Lab
these are
theory.
all big stories that they really just
Yes.
got wrong, and they never did any sort of cleanup on.
No. Never did any cleanup on it. Never did. Oops, my bad. But here's something funny that was in the article. He said it wasn't him, but he said when somebody asked someone else at NPR's science team why they were so just automatically dismissive of the lab leak theory, their response was very bizarre. The
Oh
response
no.
was that they compared it to the lab leak theory. They compared that to the Bush administration's unfounded argument that Iraq possessed weapons of mass destruction, apparently meaning that they would not get fooled again.
Okay.
Now, I thought that was very weird, and I guess the person who said it didn't understand the irony because it was the government under the Bush administration that came out and said Iraq had weapons of mass destruction. So you could
Right.
say, okay. But then it was also the government, it was Fauci and the government that was saying that they did not believe the lab leak theory.
Oh yeah,
So how is that not
interesting.
exactly the same thing? Like, I don't, what's this person talking about?
They did get fooled again.
Exactly. By the same people. I guess when they said it, they meant like right wingers because it was a right wing government. And they thought, well, Fauci's left wing or neutral. Right. So they didn't think of that.
There's
It's hilarious. But
there's that left right bias showing again.
Mhm. But now this is where it's interesting. So all these things I'm talking about, these are only like the beginning. This is only the seeds. Okay. There was one event that happened in 2020. Okay. That actually was like the huge change, like the massive change that set all NPR down this path. What do you think it was?
The massive change, I'm not sure. Why don't you
Yeah.
tell me?
Something that happened in 2020. Okay.
2020?
Yeah.
Was someone elected president in 2020?
Before the election, beginning of the year, 2020,
Oh,
first
just
quarter.
tell me, Sitch. Come on.
There was a guy who maybe ended up dying named George
Oh,
Floyd.
okay. So it's a George Floyd
It
situation.
was the
Yeah,
George Floyd
look,
situation.
how I should have known that obviously George Floyd is going to send NPR into a tizzy.
Right. Right, exactly.
How could
So
how could I forget about the summer of love?
exactly. So Yuri says something very interesting. He says in the article, he says, given the circumstances of George Floyd's death, it would have been
Mhm.
an ideal moment to tackle a difficult question. Is America a progressive active as progressive activists claim, beset by systemic racism in the 2020s in law enforcement, education, housing, and elsewhere? We at NPR have a very powerful tool for answering such questions, journalism that lets evidence lead the way. But the message from the top was very different. America's infestation with systemic racism was declared loud and clear, and it was a given that our message at NPR was to change it.
Wow,
Okay.
straight up activism.
Right. And he says, now this is what did surprise me that the CEO of NPR at the time was a guy named John Lansing, and he had a complete top down woke approach of like basically enforcing like hyper progressive values on NPR. And he actually sent out an article to everyone in the company that said, quote, when it comes to identifying and ending systemic racism, we at NPR can be agents of change. Listening and deep reflections are necessary, but not enough. They must be followed by constructive and meaningful steps forward. I will hold myself accountable for this. So he's saying, when he says deep reflection is necessary but not enough, what he's saying is just like writing stories and explaining things is not enough. We need to actually force the issue here. Okay. We need to have a critical theory approach and actually have some sort of, we as an NPR needs to like fight racism, get rid of it.
Yeah, this is terrible. Because I mean, you basically they become fiction writers now.
Yeah.
They're crafting a story. They're not necessarily just trying to uncover the facts of the situation and let it play out however it's going to play out.
Well, exactly. How can you be an unbiased journalistic institution if you've number one, your CEO has told you this. Number two, why has your CEO just assumed that all of these claims are true? You know, as Yuri said, like the whole point should have been to investigate whether the claims of systemic bias in our country and in the policing is even true. But here the CEO is just automatically assuming it's already true, just based because of what happened to George Floyd, which, by the way, had nothing to do with racism at all.
Yeah, this is horrible. This is
So,
horrible.
but anyway, so the CEO continues. Okay, he says in confessional language, he said that the leaders of public media, starting with NPR, must be aware of how we observe ourselves having benefited from white privilege in our
Oh my
careers.
God.
We must understand the unconscious bias we bring to our work and interactions. We must commit ourselves, body and soul, to profound changes in ourselves and our institution. And then he declared that the diversity on staff and in our audience was the overriding mission, the quote, North Star of the organization. Phrases like that's part of the North Star became part of meeting and more casual conversation around NPR. Okay.
Wow.
So this one CEO, for whatever reason, he gets this bug up his ass. He changes the entire structure of NPR, which was already, obviously had a left-wing bias, to just be hyper fixated, hyper focused on race identity politics.
Yeah, that's crazy. You're supposed to be a news organization.
Yeah.
You're supposed to uncover the truth. And this is kind of the political debate around George Floyd and systemic racism is, how much progress have we made as a society? A lot of people took it for granted when Barack Obama was elected president that we'd made, substantial progress.
Mm-hmm.
But then just to accept, to basically say, no, really, we haven't made any progress. But we're going to make progress through writing fake news articles. Like, what exactly what's the plan here? What's the
Right.
plan, guy? Right? Like, how do you make this? How does he implement this project of his when your organization is just basically supposed to be reporting the facts?
Well, that's
Sitch,
the
how do you
problem.
do that?
You can't. You have to make a decision. You have to make a decision where you say, okay, we're going to be an organization that's dedicated to finding out what is true and reporting it, or we're going to be an organization that has a political agenda, a philosophical, political, ideological agenda, and we're going to promote that. We're going to assume that the claim that we live in this hyper racist society is true, and we're going to show it's true, and we're going to speak truth to power, and we're going to fix it. We're going to fix America, make us not racist. We're all going to acknowledge our own white privilege, baby.
See, this is where news is helpful because obviously news is good at uncovering corruption, and
Yes.
people are drawn to that. So there's the the motivations of the news producers and the motivation of the public are aligned, right?
Well,
Ferret
they're
out
supposed to
corruption.
be.
Yeah, yeah, but like in this
Right.
case of the Hunter Biden laptop situation, it's not necessarily aligned, right?
Sure. Or like the narrative around the police shooting,
Sure, yeah.
you know, where what was the guy who did this? Was it Roland Fry? Was that the guy's name who did the
Oh
study
yeah,
that was like, oh, actually, there's literally zero evidence that white police officers are, you know, acting in some racially biased way to shoot black people. It was like
right.
the opposite. They were like less likely to shoot a black person than a black cop was. So, so Yuri continues about how NPR then became, because of this, because of the CEO, who's not CEO anymore, he just quit recently,
Oh
but
nice.
but became race and identity obsessed. Okay. Not only did the employees all have to go through, all the DI trainings, all the unconscious bias trainings, but they also, whenever they interviewed someone, they had to ask the interview subject what their race, gender, and ethnicity was, and then take that information and put it in a centralized database at NPR.
Wow. So they're basically doing quotas just on the interviews.
I guess that's why. I mean, I don't know why else you'd have that information. But it gets worse. It gets even worse. Okay. NPR gets this $1 million grant. Okay.
Right.
What do they do with $1 million grant? Do they hire more journalists? Do they have some kind of, get more equipment? They have better training for the journalists? No, of course not. They take this $1 million grant and they create a series of identity based, quote, resource groups for employees. Okay. These were groups based around biological identity that employees could join if, of course, they matched said biological identity. Right. Now, let me read you the names of some of these groups before I tell you what they were doing. There was the MIGPOC group.
Yeah, this one's hilarious.
This was the Marginalized Genders and Intersex People of Color Mentorship Program.
Wow. Who's doing the mentoring there? Is it the intersex people
I don't know.
are
Well,
mentoring people?
is there more than one? How many how many intersex people of color? First of all, being intersex person is like super fucking rare as it is. Okay.
Right.
That puts you definitely in the very lower percentile of things. Most places, there's not going to be anyone who's intersex working there. What are the
Hmm.
chances that NPR not only they had an intersex person, they had multiple intersex people, and they had enough intersex people that they could separate them by having intersex people of color have their own special group.
It's crazy.
Okay.
Mentoring people too. Like
Yes. Yes.
what makes you more qualified to mentor if you're intersex?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
They had the Mi Gente group, which is the Latinx employees at NPR. You had NPR Noir for the
Oh
black
my,
employees.
please no.
It was
Did
called
they
NPR
really?
Noir. Yes.
Did they really?
Yes.
Oh my God.
NPR Noir.
That's so
That's pretty. Listen,
cringe.
that's pretty cool, right? You had the Southwest Asians and North Africans at NPR. Very boring with a name. Look at that. You had one for the Muslim identifying employees. You had the woman, gender expansive, and transgender people and technology throughout public media, which seems very specific. You had the Tervev, which was the Jewish heritage and culture at NPR. So even the Jews were getting in on this. Okay. Like even my people were getting in on this. And you had the NPR Pride, the LGBTQIA employees at NPR. These were the groups. These were the $1 million grant special identity groups that were
No
created
white
for all these
pride?
employees. I was gonna say, you notice if you're like a white guy, if you're a straight white male, you're kind of SOL here. You're like, well, all these people get all these special groups, and what's up with this? I'm just out here in the cold by myself.
Yep.
Now you might
Un-
say, okay, Sitch, what is the point of all these ridiculous groups? Were these just places for people to chill, right? To have coffee, to have pizza parties, to chew the fat, to trade TikTok dances, to watch skibbity toilet videos together? No, obviously not, because it gets so much worse. As Yuri in the article explains, he says that these groups, these identity based groups, became a priority for NPR's union. Okay. And would start to come up in collective bargaining agreements. The current contract in a section that the employees had at NPR on their DI section, they had a DI section in their union bargained contract required that NPR management keep up to date with the current language and style guidance from the journalist affinity groups. Okay. So what that means is that whatever these ridiculous groups would come up with and say, okay, well, you have to use this language. You have to style your articles in this way. Under contract, NPR's editors had to listen to whatever these stupid fucking groups said.
They are basically fighting over the style guide of NPR. Like whether or
Yes.
not black is capitalized and white is
Yes.
lowercase.
Yes. 100%.
This is idiocy. Like,
Yes.
remember we were talking about finding the truth, weeding out corruption? Now we're arguing over whether or not black has a capital B.
Right. And you know what? How screwed up is this? As Yuri brings up, he's like a white guy. I don't think he says, I
Oh,
don't
of
think he was in any of these
course.
groups,
Yeah, I'm
right?
sure he's dripping with white guilt.
No, but like, why is he and someone else who pays membership dues to the union but isn't in one of these groups? Why do these groups get priority power over the other members in the group and making these determinations at these meetings?
Because stolen land, Sitch,
Oh, okay,
obviously. Yeah.
okay. And so some of the things that he talked about in terms of like the language was just some of the examples he brought up was that, um, they couldn't use the words biological sex in articles anymore,
Oh my word.
right?
How are you supposed to get at the truth then? That's the thing that I hate about the pronoun game in these articles, because they're writing articles about some transgender person in prison,
Mhm.
and it's a male prison and they're using all she pronouns.
Yep. And this also, he kind of attributes this to a lot of the ultra clickbaity articles from NPR that was coming out. There was one that was like how the Beatles as a band made America more racist. There was ones about how it's like how birds are named if somehow was racism. There were crazy articles that were justifying looting during the Summer of Love. There was articles that were saying that being worried about crime and an increase of crime is actually racist.
Oh,
There was an
wow.
article that I think we even talked about on stream that they were saying that if you're Asian American and you're coming out against affirmative action, you're being manipulated by the evil white conservatives. Okay.
Wow. Wow.
You should just shut up. So, but Yuri seems like a super cool guy because he was like, listen, the CEO comes out and he talked about how important is diversity. But what I'm looking around and saying, yeah, we have diversity of like faces and ethnic groups, but we don't have any diversity of thought at all,
Shut
right?
up. Shut up,
So,
Yuri.
right. So he goes and he apparently this he found this information was that at the Washington D.C. headquarters where he was at, he said, okay, how many people on the editorial staff vote Democrat? How many vote Republican? He said, okay, I found 87 people who are registered Democrats on the editorial staff. How many people do you thought did he? How many people do you think he found that were registered Republicans on the editorial staff?
Zero.
Zero. You're completely
Look
correct.
at this
You're
right
completely
here.
correct. And so he takes this information and he's like, listen, I'm going to go to the CEO. He says that he cares about diversity, right? I'm going to go on and
Oh,
present to him
no.
and tell him
Really?
that he needs that yeah, we should fix this, right? So he messages CEO and he's like, we got to talk about this. CEO doesn't respond, right? He
Of
messages him
course
again.
not.
He
Look at
messages him again.
this.
He's like, no, listen, CEO, like we really got to talk about this. We really got to talk about this. And he says, oh, I'll love to talk to this. I'll schedule a meeting, right? We're going to schedule a meeting. Okay. Meeting comes around. Oh, I'm sick. I can't make your meeting. I'm so sick.
Wow.
Never reschedules it. They never get the meeting. Totally blows them off, right?
But aren't the evil Republicans against their mission of diversity and inclusion?
Well, that's what's so ridiculous about this whole thing is that from like the left going on and on and on about diversity, they don't, it's all like a facade, especially at a journalist organization like NPR. You think the most important part of diversity you want is intellectual diversity, ideological diversity, right?
Of
It's
course.
that's what it is. It's reporting information. You need a diverse set of people with different opinions in their heads. Okay. If you have the most physically diverse, I mean, this is why liberalism is key. Liberalism is like, it doesn't matter what your skin color is. What matters is like your personality and how you think about things and what you're doing, right? Your skin color doesn't matter. And you have the leftists and the hyper progressives come in and they're like, no, we don't like liberalism. We need to go back to biological collective, group orientation. We need to go back to the old ways, which is kind of funny because they're left. And that's why they don't care. They don't care about intellectual diversity. And in fact, that's a threat because if they want everyone to just be in line, you can't question any of this ideology, any of this garbage that they're putting out there.
Yeah, which sucks in any sort of truth seeking organization.
It can't work. It can't be a truth seeking organization. It's just a propaganda outlet. So, okay. Well, here's what's funny. So, actually, NPR wrote an article about this article. He didn't write this article on NPR. He still works there, but NPR wrote an article about it. And it's actually very fascinating because I expected the article to be like really biased, but it actually wasn't. It was
Really?
actually a pretty fair article,
They're
which
getting their
made
crap
me
together.
which made me think there's there's a lot of people there that think, this is true, right? There's probably a lot of people, and not just NPR, a lot of these other organizations that hate this woke stuff, and they're just dying for it to go away. But they're like, they don't have the balls, or they don't have the capacity to be the ones to attack it. But maybe they'll kind of try to help it attack it, when it comes along. But anyway, and so in the article they talk about some things, and it's actually hilarious. They asked the former CEO to comment on this story and the claims that Yuri made about, not about him not really caring about real diversity. And this is what the guy said. Okay. The former CEO. He said, the philosophy is, do you want to serve all Americans and make sure it sounds like all of America or not? I'd welcome the argument against that.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I said.
That's it? That's not very illuminating.
So all he was, yeah, but so what he was saying is he wanted to make NPR look like, quote, look like America, right? And he's so stupid that he thinks that if you had the NPR staff have a perfect breakdown racially of what America was, that that would be representative of America when you literally have no conservatives on your staff, and that's 50% of America.
Yeah, that's crazy too because I mean there are liberals and conservatives in every single ethnic enclave. Like
Yes.
so he's only representing black progressives. Like he's not
Yes.
representing black conservatives.
Yes. He's
Yeah.
only representing white progressives.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're not representing America at all, man.
No. They quoted, this is interesting. They quoted someone who was a former NPR vice president, okay, Jeffrey Dvorkin, who tweeted out when this article came out. He said, I know Yuri. He's not wrong. Okay. So former NPR vice president agreed with this article. And then this was actually pretty hilarious. There was a guy named Fernando Alfonso, a senior supervising editor for digital news. He did not like Yuri's article. Okay. He said, as a person of color, it's never good when you start that like as your opening like gambit.
Yeah, what the heck?
As a person of color who has often worked in newsrooms with little to no people who look like me, the efforts NPR have made to diversify its workforce and its sources are unique and appropriate given the news industry's long-standing lack of diversity. These efforts should be celebrated and not denigrated as Yuri has done. So again, they just want their own ideological conformity. They don't actually want real diversity. In a liberal society, real diversity would be diversity of thought. They don't actually want that.
Yeah, they want the jobs going to their ethnic peers,
Yeah, it's
which I
terrible.
mean, people used to
Seems
call
really
that
racist.
racism.
Yeah,
I
seems really
mean,
racist. Yes.
right.
This is why racial group identification is toxic and poisonous. And I was so happy that for most of my life, it seemed like America was moving in a good direction, expunging it from society. And unfortunately, now the left wants to drag it back in. And now that's making a bunch of now it's making a bunch of racist people on the right want to drag it back in. It's like, no, please, can we just not be racist? God, can we just not do it? But I'm great. I'm so happy this article came out. I do think this article has made waves and will continue to make waves. And it's just another chink, another hole in the dam's opening up for this whole horrible woke progressive system, which basically everyone who lives under despises is waiting to tumble and come crashing down.
So this article just recently came out. Is this Yuri guy? Why don't they just make this Yuri guy the CEO? That
They
would solve
should.
everything, right?
They should, yeah.
They're probably just going to fire him though. What
Well, the
is
CEO, the current CEO of NPR gave a very safe response. They're like, we welcome all, opinions and critiques and thoughts on like,
Yeah,
what we're doing.
he's in an uncomfortable spot because he's been set
She,
up.
you bigot.
She? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, she's in an uncomfortable spot because she's inherited a company that's basically been engineered to be, a human resources department's nightmare. So,
Hmm.
right? She's got all these different factions. I can she just dissolve these groups? I'm not sure.
Well, I don't know because if it's
Yeah.
somehow now entangled in the union contracts, like holy
Yeah,
crap, right?
exactly.
So
So
there's
that's why
actually
she's got to walk gently into this
right.
situation and yeah,
Yeah, and if she just
be
fired this guy, it
careful.
would look super awful too. But and there was an interesting article that NPR actually talked about last year where the New York Times got this guy named A.G. Sulzberger, who was a New York Times chairman and publisher. He came out and basically had a long essay saying very similar things to this, all about the New York Times last year.
Oh, nice. They're going after the
So,
New York Times as well. So
right.
who
So
knows?
So people are waking up. People are getting tired of this stuff. That's all it takes. It takes more and more people being based, coming out and speaking what is truly going on here.
Yeah, NPR used to be decent. Now it's just horrifying.
Right. And it's,
Yeah.
oh, there's another thing I forgot to mention too, which was funny. In the article, Yuri talks about how, you know, in the past, he would tell people he worked for NPR and what his job was. And people would get really excited. They'd be like, oh, I love NPR. This is my favorite segment. This is my favorite person. Like, oh, they get really excited to talk to him. But he said in the last few years, when he tells people that, there's always like a hesitation.
Right.
Like
They're
people are
like,
like,
is this guy judging me?
yeah, like, is it safe to talk to this guy? Or people will be like, they won't say that they love NPR. They'll say, I used to love NPR, right? I used to, or I used to
Right.
listen to it all the time. There's always like, he's like, there's all these caveats suddenly people are giving about NPR. And even people questioning specifically, like, what happened? Why is NPR different now? And it's funny, even my mom, who's very left wing, she complains to me about this too. She's like, oh
Wow.
my God. She's like, Sitch, oh my God, all I do is every story is about race and racism. It's kind of like, what is going on here? Why is this all they talk about? And now we know it's because the CEO literally told them to do this for 4 years.
All right. Well, let's hope it's changed. Let's hope we're going to get NPR back. Let's hope it can be saved.
Yes, I believe.
Hi, you just listened to a Sitch and Adam recorded video. That's right, we're still doing recorded videos. And we're even doing shorter daily live streams now, beginning at 2 p.m. Eastern, where we cover the top news stories of the day. Check it out. And you can super chat us, or you can join the channel. Subscribe to this channel right here to watch the live show or watch more of our awesome deep dive videos.